Hi there. I'm Martha Teichner, and this is Conversations With, and with me are Denis O'Hare and Lisa Peterson, who wrote Song of Rome. And so, let's get started. First of all, did either of you study Latin in high school?
No.
Sadly, no. I went to Catholic school for too many years, 12 years, and I was given the option of Latin, Spanish, or French, and I took French. And I guess I wish I had taken Latin, but I live in Paris now, so it came in handy.
But you weren't required to take Latin.
Not anymore.
Huh.
It was just fading. Yeah.
And what about you?
Not required. I went to high school, public high school in California. I think we had to do a language. I also chose French. I'm not good at languages, unlike Denis. I studied French for probably, including college, 4 or 5 years, but never lived there with it, so I don't have much French. But no, now in retrospect, I wish I had studied Latin.
Yeah, well, I'm making a point here. I'm just old enough so that I was required to take 3 years of Latin in high school, and if I had continued in the school that I had been in my freshman year, I would have then had to take a year of Greek my senior year.
Wow.
But that's gone now.
And then Lisa and I studied Latin for maybe like a month at Princeton. We had a fellowship at Princeton to study Virgil. Went to Italy with a classics class from Princeton to study book 6 of the Aeneid in the Forum.
We had a tutor.
We had a Latin tutor.
It was more than a month, maybe 3 months.
He was great. He was
Yeah.
amazing. We were terrible students.
But he used it, he tried to give us some of the basics.
He was really great.
I think it was a little bit helpful.
We still have our Latin books.
Yep.
And will you treasure them?
Yes, I
I
want
mean,
to.
what does it mean? I mean, obviously, first you took on the Iliad, and now you've taken on the Aeneid, and so on. What is the point of the classics today? Why did you even get interested in taking on classics?
I don't think it was I'll speak for myself, and then Lisa has probably a better answer. For me, it wasn't the classics. We weren't looking to read the classics. It was initially just the Iliad because it was a play about war, and we started doing it during the Iraq War, and we wanted to, talk about war. And as far as the Aeneid goes, it was a logical follow-up to the Iliad because of the way that Troy ties into the Aeneid, starts with Troy. So it was kind of a logical thing. I mean, I've wanted to do the Decameron. I adore the Decameron. I love Paradise Lost. It's not the classics per se. I love Beowulf. I mean, I like meaty tales. I'm not as educated in Eastern literature. I wish I were. I've read Gilgamesh. It's fantastic. So it's not even that it's Western canon. It's that these meaty, crazy, foundational stories that are out there in the world that are the underpinnings for so many things, wherever they're from, including the Mahabharata. But we just focused on these because we got kind of like obsessed with that story, and that story led to this story. In between this play, we did a play about the Bible called The Good Book. We spent 5-6 years on that one. It's been produced twice, and so we certainly spent a lot of time in the Old Testament, New Testament, dealing with the way in which the Bible was created. So we do like big topics. But
Is there something in those books, in the Iliad, in the Aeneid, that we as 21st century Americans are missing because we're not getting those as a rule? Is there something, that the classics are being canceled, if you will?
Well, I agree with Denis that we never set out to be doing pieces about classics, and even now, I think I would say we're trying to write about what it means to be American right now. And for whatever reason, our brains go to the models that we've used. And so I in fact, thought as we started Song of Rome, we are not going to do an adaptation of the Aeneid. That's not what we're doing. We're writing about the end of a republic and using Rome as the metaphor. And as I was telling you in the hallway, at first, this is actually the second iteration of this idea for us. We spent about 6 years writing a monologue for a woman to perform that tried to tell all of Roman history. Again, we were really talking about our country now, but through the metaphor of Rome, and avoiding trying to do an adaptation of Virgil. And then we shifted gears when we felt that well, I'll speak for myself. It took so long to research it and write it that I felt that history had passed the idea by to some extent, and that it was too late to stand on a stage and say, warning, warning, Roman history, take a look, it won't last forever.
And everybody is saying, I mean, the Roman-American comparison is very, very old. It's not anything we've created.
And it's getting more and more
pronounced, yeah.
Right? At least according to the media. So, as we decided to hone in on those years where the Republic turned into an empire, and to do that, we had this new idea, which was, maybe it is interesting to think about the writing of a classic and focus on the character of Virgil as he's given this assignment. And then it started to balance with an Iliad, because honestly, an Iliad, our adaptation of the Iliad, is very much about this idea of the storyteller and who is Homer. And our belief, not everybody agrees, but our belief that Homer was not a person. Homer was an action that you take. And anyone could be Homer, that Homer represents a period of time where people learned the poem and changed it, and it could be passed around. But we do believe that Virgil was a real person.
Homer being, or the Iliad being oral, and
yes,
the Aeneid being
exactly,
written.
exactly.
And you know what, I mean, not to avoid your question, I think it's a very interesting question, but one of the great distinctions between the Iliad and the Aeneid is that the Iliad is oral-based and the Aeneid is not. The Aeneid is composed, it is careful. Latin is such a tight language, my understanding of it, and that, the way in which Virgil elevated Latin is highly literary, but not necessarily performative. And so, whereas I think the Iliad is satisfying as a performance, the Aeneid isn't. It's very, the verse is very naughty. Even in translation, the verse is super naughty. Beautiful, but, difficult to do.
Naughty with a K.
With a K. And naughty. It's interesting, back to your topic a little bit about the classics. There's a great Princeton professor whose name I don't remember, who is one of the advocates for canceling the classics. And he is a classics professor. He, I think, is Dominican, or he's from the Dominican Republic, and he makes a really good argument. And his argument has nothing to do with the content. It has to do with the amount of resources that are given to any endeavor, and the amount of value is placed on any endeavor. And all he's saying is, we've spent years and years and years with this very small body of work and privileging it over everything else. We're not saying it's not worthy, we're just saying that there's a lot of things that are worthy. Why do we devote all of our time and energy to this? And he's very compelling, and the point we're kind of making also in the play, but not as loudly as we could, is the idea that, of all the literature that ever existed in Rome, we only have 1% of it.
What happened to the rest of it?
It doesn't survive, and the way that literature survives is that either it's copied out by other people, the famous Irish monks copying out, the Bible, or it is spoken about by other people. So when Cicero quotes Ennius, a famous Roman writer, Ennius doesn't exist. We have none of his books, but we have Cicero's quotes of Ennius. So we know, 75 lines of Ennius. Were they accurate? Was Cicero accurate in his remembrance of them when he quoted them? Is the person is the document from Cicero accurate? So we have this crazy game of telephone with history where what we receive is so contestable. Anyway, the fact that who was writing? Wealthy people. Slaves wrote sometimes. Terence was a slave. He was writing plays, but he represented, a rarity. Women weren't writing. Some women were writing, but very, very, very few. The point of view was highly contestable. If you read Tacitus, the Annals, are they trustworthy? This is a guy working for an emperor, basically slagging off other emperors because they were now the enemy. Is anything he said accurate? Suetonius, writing about the lives of the Caesar, is anything he wrote accurate? And also they weren't writing biography and history that we understand it. They were writing for different reasons. It was moral instruction. So anyway, we find this stuff fascinating. Is that how do you value the classics? What is the value of them? And when we studied the Bible, the thing that we really got was the idea of reception history. It's not the literature that's interesting, it's the way it's received that's interesting. And each community receives the Bible in a different way. Each community receives the classics in a different way. So in the 18th century, how did you receive the classics? What did our founding fathers find interesting in the classics? What did they pull out of it? That's different than what... An ideal that they were interpreting.
So, set the stage for the play that you wrote. Give it, for people who are not that familiar with Roman history or people who haven't seen the play yet, set the stage. Where are we in time? Who's involved, and what's happening?
Sure. Well, it's set first now, and we early on decided that we wanted to free ourselves and think about a kind of creative expression that wasn't only talking. As we both like to talk quite a lot, we were thinking, okay, so if we're going to have sort of this heady subject, we are going to be talking about this moment in Roman history, the writing of what became a classic, and how it relates to us now. But wouldn't it be great if we also could allow in other forms of expression, video, art, dance, music, that we were writing about creation, the creative act, as much as anything else, since Virgil's writing of the Aeneid is really the sort of historical subject for us. So it starts now. A young woman who is maybe a performance artist enters a space that is abstract. It's an empty space. I love to work with empty space. And yet it is filled with 5,000 books that the people at Spoleto Festival gathered for us.
We brought some, right?
We brought some. We brought about 800 that we rehearsed with in New York. And they had to be hardcover, and they had to represent all written knowledge that we have now, and also maybe call up other imagery, Roman ruins, a library. And so our set designer, Rachel Hauk, who's here somewhere, created an installation made of those 5,000 books, piles of books, towers of books. That's what we had described in the script. So this young woman comes into the space and interacts with that pile of books and sort of kicks off what is a project, basically, that she is the creator of. In that project, she takes us back to just the end of before Christ, so 30 BCE, Rome, and so she keeps going back and forth in time to show us an imagined idea about how Virgil was commissioned to write the Aeneid, and is his meetings with Augustus, who isn't Augustus yet, but who the sort of nominal leader of Rome at the time, are intercepted by Augustus's sister. Because one of the big subjects for us from the time we began working on this piece, which was maybe 2014, about 10 years ago, was the female POV. And the Iliad is very male, very male. And the questions that I have about an Iliad are basically, what is rage? What is that chemical? It's testosterone, really. I mean, to some extent. It's a very male story.
I asked Fiona Shaw to do it once. I mean, she's a friend of mine. We were in London. I asked her if she would do it and share the script, and she said, "It's not my play, darling. It's not my thing. It's a man's problem. It's not my problem."
So as we approached the story of Rome, we always knew it's either going to be a monologue for a woman, and then when we started over again, we turned it into a duet, but the woman runs it, and the woman investigates. And so you will see two actors who play contemporary characters, and then they also keep going back in time in a sort of you are there way to play Virgil and Octavia. Octavia is the sister of Octavian, who will become Augustus. And they have a relationship, which we've invented, which develops. It is based on historical fact, though, because there was a record of Virgil reading as he worked on the Aeneid, which took him a long time because he was slow. We didn't make that up. He would come and read, just like we like to read in front of an audience and learn from that. He would read whatever he was working on to his patron. And there was a time when he read the chapter in the underworld, which features the dead son of Octavia. He read it to Octavia and to Augustus. And Octavia was so moved and terrified by the idea of her son in the underworld that she fainted. And many, many painters painted that moment. And so we include that moment for the nerds in the audience who know enough about Virgil or art to know that is a painted scene captured by a lot of artists. And so you'll see this piece. It's just a little over 90 minutes long. It tries to take you to the moment as the Roman Republic is dissolving and really becoming, in retrospect, an empire run by Augustus. And at the same time, we decided we also wanted to take on the very question you just asked, why the classics? Or if we don't have the classics, what are we missing? By having two other contemporary characters, a student who happens to not care very much about the classics because she's studying medicine, and a tutor who she's hired to help her pass this class, and he happens to be a refugee who is a scholar from Syria who's just recently in the country. So we're able then to have layers where we can talk about the place of refugees, the role of women in government. We like layers. We like layer cake in terms of ideas. So we have put a lot of balls in the air, and we think we're doing a pretty good job of landing them. But last night was the first time we've ever heard it in front of an audience, ever. So this is really the beginning of a process for us.
Whose idea was it?
She came to me with the Iliad in 2003 or 4, and then I was the Bible play because I've always been obsessed with the Bible, and then she was this because you were in Arles doing a workshop with Sundance, and you were talking about the Roman theaters, and you were suddenly interested in Roman, like a Roman play.
Right. Well, we had friends asking us, wouldn't there be an interest, will you ever write a companion to an Iliad? I think often the idea would be, it seems a little bit more obvious that we might do an Odyssey and be able to do both of them. But I think Jim Nicola had sort of planted the idea of, he might have even mentioned the Aeneid.
Yeah.
And so that was rattling around, and then this was 2014, 2015, and even though when I look back, those were happy days, thinking about, from my point of view, thinking about governance. I still think it was in the air that that as an American republic, we were almost 250 years old and struggling, as I guess republics always do, and that there might be a piece here that maybe there was something interesting about picking up from the end of the Trojan War and really talking about America using Rome as the metaphor. So, yeah.
No, I think most people in school learn the myth that Romulus and Remus, who had been nurtured by a wolf, ended up founding Rome. And the Aeneid then, what Virgil does is he gets Romulus and Remus in there, but what's his mandate when he's hired by Octavian to write the Aeneid?
You know, we don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe someone does. What is known is that it's not a good marriage. It's very hard to make Romulus and Remus work with Aeneas. And so what they've done is, and he wasn't the first, it was Aeneas who first posited that Aeneas came from Troy and established a home in what was Rome, which was called Hesperia. I don't know why it's called Hesperia.
So basically, Aeneas was Trojan and he was
Yep.
in Troy, and the end of the Iliad, or the Iliad is all about the sacking of Troy.
Exactly.
And then what happens to Aeneas after the Trojan War?
Because he doesn't die, he leaves with his father, Anchises on his back, and he goes somewhere else and establishes a new kingdom. And for the Romans, you know, the Romans are an upstart people. They're a small people who keep accumulating territory. They worship the Greeks because they felt inferior to the Greeks culturally, so they borrowed Greek literature, Greek statues, Greek architecture. The Romans spoke Greek. Most Romans spoke Greek, not Latin. Julius Caesar spoke Greek. And they would worship Greece, and they would take Greeks as slaves and then put them in the government. So all the accountants, doctors, teachers were slaves, but they were Greek slaves, and they were highly educated, and they ran Rome. And I don't know. So Aeneas, as a Trojan, is the best version of Greece because the Trojans were considered highly developed. So to have Rome have as its roots Aeneas gives them stature and status.
So Virgil is inventing this supposed history.
Aeneas invented it, and then Virgil took Aeneas's work and built upon it. And he doesn't mention Romulus and Remus at all. He doesn't. But there are all these family trees you can see. So Aeneas marries Lavinia. They have a son. He already has a son named Iulus from his Ascanius. Ascanius is a son from Creusa, his wife who he left behind in Troy. He's got a new wife, Lavinia. They have kids. And you have this weird long family tree, and maybe it's like 15 generations to get to Romulus and Remus. And they're in a place called Alba Longa. I don't know why. And they can't stay in Alba Longa. I don't know why. And they have to go to a new place. They go to Rome, and they establish a new place. They have no people, so they invite the Sabine women to come. They kidnap and rape them and create Rome. And the weird thing is that all these Roman myths, they're not hidden, and they're not shame-filled. You're like the foundation stories of Rome are fratricide. It's not just Romulus and Remus killing each other. It's their forebears. What's that guy, Numia? There's two kings, Numitor, and there's two kings who are brothers who kill each other. Romulus and Remus kill each other, and it's a really crazy, bloody.
Well, that's in the play.
It is, but I don't know why Rome embraces that sort of foundation story, but they do. It's not hidden. It's not shameful. It's very interesting.
What was the reason why this sort of exalted origin story for Rome needed to be written at all for Octavian?
Well, I want to say that I'm pretty sure that not all scholars agree that it was purely a commission. I think that because we spent some time working on this at Emory University. We're there as guests of a professor in the classics department. Again, that's where we did a lot of the writing on the version you would see here. And I think we learned from a roundtable that we did with a bunch of classic scholars at Emory in Atlanta that there's a division among scholars. Some believe that it was commissioned by Augustus, and therefore it was an assignment. And some of them don't. And some of them think that's received history, that Virgil wrote it. It was his idea. So we are leaning, because it's interesting to us to think about what does it mean to be commissioned, what's the artist's responsibility in the flowering of a republic, in the success of a republic. In our version of things, I think that Octavian has an interest in inspiring the Roman people after a bad patch of civil war and mess that kind of culminated in Julius Caesar and the assassination of Julius Caesar and the civil war that followed that, but that was not the only thing. And Dennis's memory is so incredible. He's like a walking encyclopedia, and he can tell you that there's a period of about 40 to 50 years before Julius Caesar where other people tried to seize control of Rome. So it was a mess that Octavian ended up kind of, let's say, cleaning up. And so what we imagine, this is our sense of it, is that he had every reason to have the great poet at the time write this piece of history that would start way back at the beginning and make Romans feel destined and strong and beautiful.
Well,
and like the gods intend us to be Rome, and we have a big, wonderful, expansive history ahead of us.
Manifest
future
destiny.
ahead of us.
Roman manifest destiny.
Yeah, because it is, and so the history that Virgil's writing is meant to be, I think, I mean, I can't help think, I don't think there is an American epic about the Pilgrims, but if there were, what brought them here?
We have Johnny Appleseed, we have Paul Bunyan.
We have
we have like interesting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting question. What are the American myths?
We don't have a cohesive one. We don't have a.
We have we do have a
James
sort of
Fenimore Cooper.
yes,
Yeah.
and
Hiawatha.
we have a Thanksgiving myth,
Yeah.
which is that the Pilgrims came on these 3 boats, they landed, they said hello to the Indians, please come and have a giant dinner with us, and therefore began.
They cut out paper turkeys.
Met with their hands.
With their hands.
Yes.
That's right. It's funny because if you think about, Julius Caesar claimed descent from Venus, and Octavian was a blood relative, but also the adopted son of Julius Caesar. So it was very important for him to be descended from Venus. So part of what happens in the Aeneid is that Aeneas is the son of Venus. And so you have this direct line from Aeneas to Julius Caesar to Augustus. And, when we were doing the Bible play, it was interesting because we talked a lot about St. Paul being the founder of Christianity, which a lot of biblical scholars talk about, and the fact that St. Paul spent a lot of time justifying how a crucified man could be a savior, because to the Greek mind, that was a shame. Crucifixion was a shame. So Paul spent a lot of energy trying to make that okay with the Greek mind, because the Greeks ended up being most of the converts. They were the ones who became Christians. And so he had to sell it to them in a way. And so he went back into the Old Testament and found verses that would basically, because there was no New Testament, he would create a biblical canon from Old Testament, Isaiah especially, knowledge. And that's what Virgil's doing. He's going back into literature and creating a foundational literature that can seem like it was always there.
And I think I would just also add that this is, again, as I imagine it, we have a very important offstage character, Augustus.
Yeah.
And I believe that he knew, listen, they'd lived through these 500 years of a republic, which was complicated structurally, as I understand it, 2 consuls, always. We can never have a single leader again, because the reign of the kings was so, in their memory, foul that we have to have a republic. So we will never have a king. Therefore, we can't have a single leader. We don't have a single leader. They ran for these positions. They served in pairs.
For 1 year.
They could only serve for a year, then they serve again. This, as I understand it, this entire complicated republican structure was finally fractured by the usual things, ego, greed, power hunger, all those things. And so here you have Octavian. He has actually managed to get himself into a position where he's so strong, he has so many troops, he has the belief of the Roman people because he ended the Civil War. And I think he knows, I need to run things. And now, for better and for worse, he's going to run things. So he needs a national epic that says, a man named Aeneas founded Rome. Not 2 men.
Not Romulus and Remus, yeah.
One man. and therefore it supports empire. Even though at the time I don't think anybody in Rome was saying empire, and certainly Octavian was not saying, I'm the emperor. He wouldn't say that. He said, oh, no, I'm just the first citizen, but, I'll run things for a while. And in fact, I'll even have a co-consul, but the co-consul had no power. And so slowly, over his long reign, by the time he died, he was called emperor.
Imperator, yeah.
When you're talking about the origin mythology that he needed to justify that, and the devastation of the people, I found myself thinking about Mein Kampf, and in the aftermath of World War I, where the German people were completely devastated by the reparations and shamed by the reparations that were required, Hitler came to power promising them the prominence and supremacy, and telling them that they were special people, and glorifying the German type, and so on and so forth. And Mein Kampf was there as a kind of a guidebook in some respects to what he was after. Did you think about that at all?
We didn't talk about, because there isn't specifically the idea of genocide in the story of Augustus, which I do think there is in the story
nor national identity in a weird way. Like, to be Roman, anybody could be Roman. All you had to do to be Roman was to, you had to put up an amphitheater, you had to have a crossroads, you had to make your military camp a certain way, you had to have a bath, and you worship the emperor. Bingo, you're Roman. That was a problem with the Christians. The Christians refused to, worship the emperor. You had to take a wreath, dip it in water, and put it at the statue. That's it. And, when the Christians started getting sacrificed because they wouldn't do it. And to the Roman mind, that's treason. If you're not going to worship the emperor, you're saying that he's not the emperor. It wasn't a racially based people. It wasn't an ethnically based people.
Well, there were all these people from. Rome, look at the size of the Roman Empire.
Rome was Africa. Rome was everything. Rome was multi-ethnic. I mean, it was completely multilingual. It was so vast, but they were unified by the idea that Rome, as a governmental structure, was the best there is.
I mean, we often are. Even though we began this project when Obama was president, but as time has passed, we definitely are thinking a lot about Make America Great Again as an idea, that. And I've been thinking a lot about Putin, maybe because we just recently saw Patriots, which is a play that Peter Morgan wrote about the rise of Putin, and it's really interesting. But
is there an analogy between Octavian / Augustus and Putin?
He doesn't fit neatly.
Neatly.
According to me, I don't think he fits neatly with anybody. He's sui generis.
He meaning Putin, or he
meaning Augustus? I love Augustus. I think he's really interesting. I think he's a fascinating figure. If you see the series Rome on HBO, anyone ever see that? The guy who played Augustus in that was pitch perfect. I thought everything else was kind of wrong, but Augustus is pitch perfect.
Who was it?
I don't know. I don't know who the actor was, but the portrayal was absolutely dead on. Cold, calculating, but Augustus wasn't the villain. He was, he was incredibly successful at
it seemed interesting to talk about a wobbly republic turning into something else, which will be an empire, not because of anything we might call quote unquote evil.
Yeah.
But more about the willingness of a citizenry to be taken care of by somebody, and it's true. I also don't.
I'm the guy who can fix things.
I'm a guy who can fix things.
And
he could be Biden. It could be anybody. I mean, I think Augustus was thought of as a really good leader. He certainly he had a very long.
Successful reign.
Yeah. What's the other word? I keep thinking reign, and that would be rejected because that's monarchical. But he tenure. He was, and it was a good time for Rome actually. But then what followed it was not good. The emperors who followed Augustus were the ones that we think of as Nero.
Tiberius, Nero, Caligula.
Caligula, yeah.
In the play, you get the sense that when they became too centralized and they stopped admitting the people from the vast,
The Goths.
Yeah.
the Goths and so on and so forth, and other people who were from the empire, that's when it kind of, the fabric unraveled.
Yeah.
Well, one of the greatest defeats ever in Rome was the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, which was, I think, during Augustus's reign, and it was a catastrophe for Rome. I don't remember the numbers. Let's say it was 40,000 troops killed, and it was the Goths who were also Romans. So the Goths would come into the Roman army. The Alemanni, they become part of the Roman army, and then the Romans treated this one guy badly, and he got disaffected, and so he left. And he took with him all the knowledge of how the Romans fought. And he created a perfect trap, because he knew that the Romans needed to group to win. So they would do this thing called a turtle. They would put their troops in like a line of 12 by 12, put their shields up, spears out, and they would advance. It was impenetrable. But to do it, they had to get to an open plain. So this guy was like, great, we'll lure them into a trap. We'll make them go down a very, very narrow pathway between two forests, and there's the open plain. And they did, and they slaughtered them. They killed them. Destroyed them. And that's because the people they were fighting were also the people who were in their own army. They would hire mercenaries, and the mercenaries would then be disaffected, and they would leave. So when the Goths sacked Rome in 410, they were Roman citizens. They had been in Rome. They had been disenchanted. They had left Rome. They had asked for help. The Romans said, no, we won't help you. They were fighting off the Huns, somebody at their rear.
Sounds like a more successful version of the Wagner Group.
Yes. Well, yeah,
Exactly.
For the same purpose.
Yeah, but the Roman army was like incredible, but the point is that as the kingdom got bigger and bigger and bigger, they had a harder time unifying around the idea of just being Roman. You started getting fractures on ethnic lines. And
I think the question on everybody's mind, unspoken so far, is we're facing an election in November, and Republicans and Democrats say that this is a singular election that could determine the outcome of our republic, our democracy, and everybody has their own reasons for that belief. And where does this play? Where do your thoughts? Where does the example of Virgil, the Aeneid, Augustus fit in all of that?
we have a favorite story of ours, which we're going to put back in the play maybe, but it was in the play larger, about the Gracchi brothers. The Gracchi brothers were Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They were 163 BC, around there. And they were tribunes of the plebs. They were the other side of you had the plebeians and you had the patricians. So they were supposedly working class. They weren't. They were very wealthy. And they wanted to bring land reform to Rome, and they wanted to basically, if Rome went out and captured land, who gets it? And the answer was the rich senators got it. They would be given booty, and they would put slaves on it, and they would form vineyards, and they would, basically take all the wealth. So the Gracchi said, why should the senators get it? Shouldn't the Roman people have it? Shouldn't we parse it out amongst the poor or the soldiers or somebody? That was such a threatening idea, and the way that Tiberius went about it was illegal, that the Roman senators took their furniture in the Senate house, broke it into bits, and beat him to death in the forum. They beat him to death. 10 years later, his brother brought the same bill up, and they beat him to death. And they beat him so hard his head fell off into the Tiber. And the Gracchi were national heroes. Their mother was Cornelius Gracchus. She was the granddaughter of one of the most famous celebrated Roman generals who had beat Hannibal in the Punic Wars. So they were high level Romans. And the thing that happened was a norm was broken. We have tradition, we have norms, we have rules, we have ways of behavior. You don't do certain things. And they broke that norm and never went back. So to us, the cautionary tale is when you break tradition, when you break norms, when you break decorum, when you elect certain kinds of people and you have them in government who refuse to, I won't name names, they refuse to, not about cordiality, I'm just talking about human dignity. They violate human dignity by screaming during someone's speech or calling names or using profanity. You're breaking norms. And there's only one way to go from that. You continue to go downhill. You continue breaking norms. That's what happened in Rome. The norms got broken, and pretty soon you had private armies, you had militias. The private militias, Sulla and Marius, they bought their own private armies, and they beat up the other people's candidates, and they started killing each other. They started killing other people. If you are a Republican, let's just put two parties, Democrat, Republican, Marius would kill you. If you were a Democrat, Sulla would kill you. And that's what they did. They were just killing each other's supporters in the streets, which is what Octavian came in and stopped.
What did you all study? I mean, you mentioned you took a course at Princeton with a classics professor. You went to Emory and so on and so forth. What did you read? What did you study? Because it seems like suddenly you know a whole lot more about Roman history and the whole background of it than most people.
Well, we definitely started with Virgil. We read it out loud to each other a couple of times. So we did start there with Virgil and the Aeneid. And then, you know, we kind of learned from some new scholar friends, well, these are the things you have to know. These are the writers you have to know, the names you have to know, and we began reading them. Denis is a ferocious reader with a great memory, so you can probably, I mean, I think you read all of Livy, and that's pretty basic. You kind of have to read that. I read a lot of Marcus Aurelius, but that's philosophy, not history. History's hard for me. My memory doesn't work that way, so I can read it and then it's gone the next minute, really.
Did you read particular translations that people would recognize or not?
Sometimes, or we would just kind of, whatever was available to us.
Penguin classics.
I became a big Cicero fan.
Yes.
I think Cicero's writing is quite amazing, and I like his story. Like, I could do a whole, we actually did, in the pandemic, we did a splinter project for New York Theater Workshop, which took one chapter of our solo version called What the Hell is a Republic Anyway? And we made a piece that was 6-episode Zoom cast, I guess you'd say. Denis and I were the characters, we played ourselves, and we sort of exposed our research. This was just before the election.
And we had
4 years ago.
scholars come on and talk with the Zoom audience, and we made the Zoom audience play games with us by holding up cards and things and voting.
And so that whole idea was sort of, well, we have an election coming up. We've been trying to write a play that talks about how republics end and the end of norms as a sort of, yes, a kind of warning, but we don't have time to write it. So we're just going to share our research with you.
It's funny.
And we made a little movie where Denis plays Cicero, the death of Cicero.
Cicero's
so I
dream.
became sort of obsessed with Cicero for a while. I don't know, what else did you read a
Tacitus
lot.
is great. The Annals are great. It's all gossip. Ovid is amazing. Obviously, the Metamorphosis is amazing. We read, not Procopius. Who's the guy, the weird guy who hated the Byzantines? He was like the guy who like...
Is Procopius.
He hated Justinian and his wife. Anyway, I mean, you know, there's tons of history. I mean, you know, the kings were 750 BCE. You know, Rome fell at Constantinople was 1453. So somewhere in that's Roman history.
We also listened to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, Mike Duncan. Great Rome podcast. Great Rome podcast.
I tried to read Gibbon. I tried to listen to Gibbon.
Decline
I
and Fall
got
of the Roman
about
Empire.
you got
I read
pretty
Gibbon.
deep. All of it?
Yeah,
All of it.
yeah, it's fun.
Unbelievable. I mean, I believe you. I could only get about like a tenth of the way into Gibbon, and then
You
was.
didn't like his tone.
I didn't like his
It was
tone.
it's very.
And by tone, I really probably mean the actor who was reading
Yes,
him.
exactly.
'Cause, I don't know Gibbon.
It was
himself.
somebody British, and it was very.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you ever thought of doing audiobooks of all those?
You know, that's a whole other topic. I've done audiobooks. I've done a lot of like
They're hard work.
James
I've
Patterson
done one.
books. I love doing them, but the market has changed. The whole it's changed. Yes, the answer
I
is
mean,
yes.
I listened to the Aeneid with Simon Callow
great.
doing the Aeneid
Yeah.
and so on, and I listened to him doing the Iliad and so on
Great.
and so forth, and it just it's like acting in a way
Oh,
to hear
yes,
that.
yeah.
And in this, you've chosen not to act in it,
Yeah.
but you did act in an Iliad.
Yep.
What's the difference? I mean, why one and not the other?
You know, when Lisa and I work together, it's difficult. She's the director, so when she's directing, I become sort of the de facto writer in the room in a weird way. I'm responsible for keeping up with things, not always perfectly. Changes, making suggestions, I'll go away and I'll make cuts or I'll make ideas, or we might have a discussion in a room and she'll say, we should work on this, and then I'll go away and work on it, then we'll come together. But so there's a division of labor that if I'm also acting, it's harder. With an Iliad, we wrote it, it's done. So when we come in together and do it, she's my director, I'm the actor, but there's no writer present. We don't change anything. But for a new project.
Doing something like this is such a huge departure. Maybe it isn't from American Horror Story or the Sondheim show that you just did.
Here we are.
What's that like? And I mean, what is one comic relief for the other, or what for you as an actor? What's the balance? What's the challenge?
Yeah, I think both Lisa and I struggle with the same thing, which is that it's hard to think of ourselves as writers, even though we are. You've been writing forever. I mean, you've done adaptations of plays forever and literature forever. I've been writing since I was 12. I was a poetry major at college. You know, I wrote poetry for 2 years and studied poetry, and I've written tons of screenplays, and not all of them produced. But it's hard to like take the role of writer when you're also something else. If you're known as an actor, people don't want to let you be something else. So I've always been a writer. You've always been a writer. You're also a director. But for me, the idea of creation is not only empowering to create something from nothing. It's so amazing to have nothing and then to make something. To sit in an audience and have the characters on stage with a set that you, in your mind, created, and to watch other people listening to it is awesome. It's a crazy thing that you made it. It's crazy, and it's ephemeral.
Like describing a dream.
Yeah.
It's like having a dream and then being able to go show other people, look, like that. That's what it was. That's the dream I just had. So it is amazing, yeah.
And you know, as actors and even as directors, we are interpreters. We don't create. We interpret. And we have to wait for a job. You sit by the phone and wait for a job. You know, you don't get the phone call. Making something, you make your own job. You know, I mean, Lisa and I don't get paid. We got paid a little bit to start this one from the McCarter, but that was 10 years ago, and you can't live on it. But we make our own stuff to make our own stuff.
But there are some actors who do blockbuster movies in order to spend time on the stage because they don't get paid as much.
Yeah. Or they make blockbuster movies in order to create a production company to then make films for other writers or for their dream project, you know, or to foster an environment where a writer who wouldn't get an opportunity now gets an opportunity. A lot of actors end up having production companies just for that reason.
Do you find theater more satisfying than, say, television or movies, or all of it depending on the character, or what is the equation for you?
I think for anybody who comes from the theater, you know, theater's always going to be more satisfying in a way, because it's a full body endeavor. You're out there by yourself. You're using all of your resources. Film is really satisfying in a different way. You can do things in film that you can't do on stage. And TV it's an interesting way of life. You know, you work with the same group of people for years maybe, and you get to create a character over a long arc. They're each really, really different. It's really, really hard to say. I mean, you've dabbled in all mediums.
I haven't, no, I haven't. I'm pure theater geek all the way. I like watching television, especially really smart. Like, I think there's a lot of great writing in television. And I've absolutely not dabbled. I mean, we've only in the pandemic I found myself, like, I bought the book, How to Write a Screenplay, because I was taking something that I'd made in the theater and trying to adapt it into something people could watch in their homes.
You don't think of a writer who's a director and so on buying a book saying how to write a screenplay.
Yes, there's a book, because there's a form there's a structure you have to learn and a way of writing you have to learn. So, yeah, I did. But I've always I feel extremely lucky to have early on in my life found a thing I loved to do, found out the part of it that I was good at, because that's hard too.
You were an actor.
I started out acting, and I mean, as a kid, and in college, I discovered a thing called directing, and that from the minute I started it, I thought, I love this. This is my thing. I think I might know how to do this. And the lucky part is, I've been able to do it, and I still love it. Like nothing, you know, theater is so much about being in the moment when you perform it, because it's you and them, and you and your other actors, and the moment you're making is never going to be exactly the same. This is why you're great, because you know how to capitalize on that. Denis is really great at this. Not all actors are. Always the moment is new, always new. You're never repeating yourself. But theater's structured that way. It's never going to be the same. What we did last night, we'll never do again. That'll never happen again. Tonight will be a thing. It'll be its own thing. I love that. And then I love making it, because when you're in the room with a bunch of actors and designers and everyone's thinking about the same thing, and maybe your co-writer or your writer is sitting there and you're all like, try that. Oh, that's funny. Darker, you know. What do you think?
By the way, I have a new line. I have a new joke. I came up with a joke this morning.
Yeah?
For Octavia.
Oh,
I think it'll work. By the way.
So are you
I
going to
kissed her. I was like, that's how we can get a laugh.
Are you going to tell us?
No.
You have to
Never.
come. Maybe we'll get it in tonight.
I think James Sturber said, discussing comedy is like dissecting a frog. It's not funny and the frog dies.
I'm curious, back to the play. Virgil is a refugee. Aeneas was a refugee from Troy. And Azem, the classic scholar who teaches the medical student, is a refugee. What was why did you make him a refugee like the others, and what was going on there in your minds?
Well, again, it really sort of starts with Aeneas and the idea of America and whose country is it and who started it. So, back to the Pilgrims and and Thanksgiving, the mythology of America is these people who were being oppressed religiously in their religion got on boats in Great Britain and came on boats to the East Coast of the United States, and there they founded something that ultimately is called America. This is what drew us to this in the first place, is that Aeneas has a similar story. You know, he's a refugee, he has a destiny, he gets on a boat, he lands in a new place, he makes a new world. So that started with Aeneas, and then in doing research, we realized, and Virgil, who wrote it, was also a refugee. We didn't make that up. That's fascinating.
Virgil's from Mantua, which was not part of the Roman Republic, and in his lifetime it got swallowed up by Rome, and then his father's land was stolen from them and given to Roman soldiers.
So they
were kicked off their land.
That seemed like that was a parallel that we discovered in the research that sort of electrified us. And in a way, one of the answers to the question, why is Denis not acting in Song of Rome, is that as we started to realize, we could have a third resonance if the tutor is also a refugee. And for a while, and this may still someday be true, we thought, well, he could be, listen, refugees come from everywhere and move everywhere. Maybe he's from Albania, and he's an Eastern European refugee, a character that Denis could play. But we also were thinking, in this moment, there might be something more interesting to saying he's from Syria, he's from somewhere in the Middle East, he's from somewhere you wouldn't necessarily think. He's a Roman scholar.
Right.
Like, we think, oh, that's a Roman scholar. But look at this Azem. He's also a Roman scholar. Of course he is. He studied in Damascus, one of the great university cities of the world. He's a Roman scholar.
Damascus, which was part of the Roman Empire at one point.
Yeah. So anyway, it developed.
Parthia.
It sort of like grew as we researched it, and then we changed and wrote things around it as we found it more and more interesting, as it is, I think, one of the big issues in our country now, is who belongs and who doesn't.
But the outcome for Virgil and the outcome for Aeneas was very different from the outcome for Azem in the play.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
I won't go any further than that.
That's
but,
right. That's a good hook, Martha. Yes.
But I'm just thinking because things don't end the same way for him that they did for the other two.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And he's in our world now. I mean, he's in the United States now.
Azem.
Awesome.
Azem.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Did you have any sense coming into this festival? I mean, we've got 3 shows in the festival this year. We have Ruinous Gods, which addresses some of these same issues: dislocation, people who were refugees, who were from war and from their native lands, and the consequences and the impact and so on, and the question of erasure and who gets to tell what story, and then that's true here too, the creation of mythology, who gets to tell a story, the idea of the refugee, and in Dark Noon, which is coming up, it's South Africans telling the story of the American West.
Yeah.
And again, looking at it from a very different lens than the American sense of the West, cowboys and Indians and Western movies and this and that and the other thing. And
Interesting.
it's just interesting that, were you aware coming into the festival or doing this, that there was this sort of arc?
No.
We weren't. No, I think Mina was. I had originally pitched him our Bible play because I love that play so much. It's 7 actors, so that's a bigger production cost.
It's expensive.
Right. They actors eat. They eat.
I was wondering whether you made Azem, when you were talking about the Bible play, I remember being in Damascus and being shown the place where St. Paul was lowered in a basket into a hiding place in Damascus.
yeah.
And so I was wondering whether in your thinking anywhere that Azem the Syrian that there was any connection
We have
there.
we have in our Bible play that he's Syrian, isn't he? He's Assyrian in our Bible play. Remember
Who is?
the other character, Miriam's lover.
Oh, Q.
Q. Yeah.
I guess he is.
Yeah, he's a Christian Syrian.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we have a fixation with Syria, I
Yeah.
guess.
It's probably like the dream language. It's you don't always know. You're pointing out things that I am like, oh yeah.
Well,
that's
in
interesting.
the very beginning of Ruinous Gods, they sing an Aramaic hymn. And I remember being in Syria, and there are church services in Damascus to this day in Aramaic. And
Yeah.
there is a town in northern Syria that I did a story on called Malula, which is built into a cliff, and the language to this day of the people of Malula is Aramaic. And you think, okay, that's what Jesus spoke, and it's that whole mixture and the connections of all of those things is ever present.
But, in terms of the resonances between the pieces, I think that was Mina's selection process. I think because I pitched him the Bible play, and then I said, "What else you got?" And then I talked about this play, and he liked the themes of this play to fit in with what he was already thinking. Actually, originally, they were going to do Julio Cesare, the Handel opera, and so that would have been perfect because it was
Yeah.
Rome.
I think
Julius
I
Caesar.
thought the theme for a while. I thought the theme of this summer was Rome.
Me
Roman
too.
history.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it morphed its way to something
Yeah.
that's slightly
But nobody
different.
told you that there was
No.
sort of a thematic line.
No, we
No.
weren't given an assignment.
Oh,
No.
okay. In a second, I'm going to turn it over to questions, but I have one silly question. Is that your good luck hat? You always seem to be wearing that hat.
I have a lot of hats. I only travel with 2 or 3 at a time because you can't put them on planes. I mean, you can't pack them.
They get squished.
I have a hat box, but you can't put the hat box overhead. So I usually wear them. I wear 2 at a time. TSA it really bothers them. I've
2
worn
at a
3
time?
hats. They really get upset with me. Sir, you have 3 hats on. I know I do. They'll have to come off. Okay.
What
They
is
say,
that?
are you a fan of Dr. Seuss?
Dr. Seuss. What is the name of that character?
Bartholomew Cubbins. Yeah.
Is that right? That's Dr. Seuss, right?
Yeah. No, and this
Great
hat
name.
actually, funnily enough, I got Bartholomew.
Yeah.
Bartholomew and the 500 Hats.
I got this hat when I did a movie called The Parting Glass, which I wrote, which is about my little sister's suicide, about my family. And this was the hat they bought for me on set, and I took it. And I keep it, and I like it. I always steal something. This is from 2004. I did Once Upon a Mattress. I stole that. It's their souvenirs. You actors, we're very superstitious, and we, like magpies, we grab things for our nests.
And then you carry them all around in a bag that weighs about 100 pounds.
My bag.
Do you really?
My
like
bag
a
weighs
little
a lot.
treasure bag that lives
No,
with
I carry a bag on my shoulder every day that weighs so much. My computer's in there, my chargers, toys for my child when
It's
he was
back there.
younger. I've always got playing cards in there. I've got balloons in there. I've got medicine in there. I've got forks, bottles of water, anything you want. I
Forks?
have. Yeah.
Huh.
It's my magic bag.
What's your treasure from playing in American Horror Story?
I've got a bunch. From season 3, I played Spaulding. I stole a little porcelain hand, which I keep in a box. And I stole matches and coasters from Hotel, season 5. Season 1, I think I stole a bow tie. I always steal something.
Really?
I mean, a lot of actors do that.
What about Here We Are, the Sondheim show?
I did steal something from that. I think I stole a bow tie, again, a black bow tie. I had a bow tie as a waiter. You know, I usually ask somebody in charge and say, if this went missing, will you get in trouble? And they'll say, what went missing? Because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, you know.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to open this up for questions. So if we could have some light, please. And the lady in the front, please. The microphone is coming your way.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here, everybody. Okay, so bear with me a second. According to the interwebs, Taylor Swift prepared for the Eras tour, right, by running on a treadmill for 3 hours and singing every song, right? Pretty good feat. But she also has, obviously, musicians and backup dancers and everybody else on stage that can cover for her when she messes up or she needs a little downtime. In preparing for a piece like the Iliad last year, or certainly this piece, which has a very limited number of actors, could you talk a little bit about process, how you go into that, how you prepare for that? As a writer, are you standing in the wings going, stick to the script, or how much flexibility is there if somehow something does get off track? And last but not least, David Osamani says hello.
Oh my God. Wow. Where is he? How do you know David? My God, Suffield. I know. Yes. Oh my God. It's crazy. That's crazy. Please say hi back. Please say hi back.
Well, you know,
Are you still with Jeff?
when people, you know, it's kind of a joke that when people who aren't in the theater see plays, they often, their comment might be, particularly if they don't like what they saw, or even if they did, they'll say, how did you learn all those lines? And we always think, oh God, can't you ask something more interesting? But honestly, learning lines is really hard.
Yep.
So it's actually a good question. Every actor, so I'm primarily a director, I've worked with tons and tons and tons of actors. Every actor has a different method. It's up to them how they do it. Some of them do, like, there are apps now where you can lay down the other lines and then leave room for yours, and you can be on the treadmill, you can be walking around, you can be doing your laundry and sort of running your lines. Some people have to look at it on the page and then close their eyes, and some people can't memorize it by themselves. They can only do it on their feet, moving around, because the body learns lines as much as the brain. So that's the actor's job, but it's really, really, really hard. So, you know, where I come in, you know, we rehearse. That's what we do. You know, so rehearsal for us could be anywhere between, I mean, ideally, we're rehearsing for a month. We're rehearsing all day, 6 days a week for 4 weeks. And over that period of time, the actor also at home is running on the treadmill, learning their lines. And then in the room, we're both figuring it out, meaning, what story are we telling? What if you walk in from up left and you come in slowly, step into the pile of books. Oh, why don't you pick up a book? Why are you picking up the book? You know, this is what we do. We sort of figure out how the story is told physically. And then we do it again and again and again and again, and then there's this middle section, and the actors are carrying the pages because they haven't memorized the lines yet. And that's really free and fun. And then you get in the middle, and it's like, okay, put the pages down. Now you have to be memorized. And this is the worst part of rehearsal for me, because they're like, line, and then someone's on book and they tell the line, and it's just deadly and really, and then they start to learn it, and then you can start to really play around. But a lot of actors can't learn lines by themselves. They have to learn it because they know, I pick up that paper as I say, good morning, you know, and if they're not picking up the paper, they can't remember good morning.
What happens in the process of, after the lines are learned, creating the persona of the character? Because there must be some moment when, okay, there's an explosion of something where who it is on the page becomes larger than that.
Different for every actor, yeah. I mean, last night, for instance, you know, Rachel Christopher, who plays our Octavia, and Cherie and Woman, she took a leap. She took a huge leap in a couple of characterizations, and I was just like, wow.
That hadn't happened before.
That hadn't happened before. She showed up.
Yeah.
As did Hadi, who plays Azem and Virgil. He definitely, and you know, when the audience came last night, they laughed as we hoped they would laugh, because there are jokes written in there. And Hadi sort of like went, oh, laughs, ooh. And you can see him kind of going, I want more of that. You know what I mean?
And that's actually good for the character.
It's very good for the character.
Because Virgil is kind of a ham, too. So
I'll tell you a funny story about that. So I did Major Barber years ago at Shaw Play with a wonderful actor named David Lansbury. And he, in Act 2 of Major Barber, we're in Salvation Army, and he leaves with a big speech. I'll never come back. I'll never come back. Turn, walk. One night he did it, and he got exit applause. And we were all like, oh, jeez. And it's not good. Exit applause is not good. Entrance applause is not good. It rips the fabric of the play. Yeah. And we who are on stage have to kind of like wait for the exit applause. And my God, not only did he get it every night from then on, because he figured out how to do it, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's an actor's trick. It's to like, you know, you get a thread and you go, ooh, and then you pull it and you pull it and you pull it. So part of the play for us now is going to be watching the audience-actor relationship, how they can repeat what happened last night, how they can get the audience to do the same thing in a way, or listen for new things. You know, I won't say what happened last night because something happened extraordinary with our audience, which may or may not ever happen again, but we were totally surprised by it, you know, a certain reaction. We were like,
Yeah.
but I don't want to set up an expectation, so I'll whisper it in your ear.
Just know that we were often surprised.
We did this. We were like this.
We were often pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we each have individual things that we're doing, and we are sort of cooking up a next idea for us to do together, perhaps. I'm going to just go as far as to say that I said to you a couple days ago that I do miss working on something that you're acting in.
Yeah.
And could we come up with something new that you would act in? So we're thinking about we've had an idea, maybe.
How do you even find time to work together? I mean, you're really busy. You're really busy. Did you do a lot of Zoom? Did you?
We did Skype before Zoom.
We did Skype in the day. We lived on Skype. My God, we lived on Skype. It was all we did.
We're in different time zones most of the time, so that is actually pretty tricky.
And you live where?
I live in New York.
And you live in Paris?
Paris. It was really bad when she was in California with her mom, and I'm in Paris. That's 9 hours difference. And that was like trying to find the time to work was just like, I'd be at midnight.
We use Dropbox a lot.
Yeah, Dropbox. We live on Dropbox.
We'll send things back and forth to each other. And because we've now been doing it for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You kind of have a language vocabulary.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
The lady here?
Lisa hired me in 1987 to do a play called The Author's Voice, a one-act play by Richard Greenberg.
In Chicago.
Yeah, in Chicago. I lived in Chicago at the time. She came in, fancy New York director.
I was a kid.
I had to audition for her, and she hired me, and we had a great time working on that. I met one of my dear friends, Linda Eamon, who's a fantastic actress, a guy named Tom Alino, amazing actor, Remains Theater in Chicago, and she didn't hire me again. And
Because Denis got very famous. And I'm sure I tried and failed. But we did stay friends, and I would see everything he did. And yeah, so when I had the idea about doing a solo Iliad, and I at the time thought, I don't really want to bring a writer in. I do a lot of work on new plays. A lot of my time is spent interacting with writers, which I love, but it's its own thing. And so I think I thought I think it would be fun to work with the source. The person who's going to be performing it should also be making it with me. And I'm still to this day so pleased with myself for thinking that Denis would be the right guy to start to make something like that with.
And I have a mantra which I took from two people, Blair Brown and Austin Pendleton, both friends of mine. And Austin Pendleton will do anything for anybody, anywhere, at any price. What is it? It's a theater of 50 people. Well, how much? $100 a week? I'm in. Let's do it. Austin will do anything, and I admire that spirit. And so when someone asks me for something, I say yes. You want to meet and talk about the Iliad? Sure. When? Where? Let's do it. You know.
Uh-oh, you're going to be deluged.
The lady right here, I think, was next.
Hi, this is rather mundane, but the Dock Street has had people projecting from there for a couple hundred years. Why microphones?
Because we have a lot of underscoring, and actors are talking over music. And so that's a slightly different thing. And often when they're speaking over music, we're also treating their voices, so that because we're going into the underworld, yeah, we wanted the capability to lift up over score, and we try not to use them if we don't need to, but yeah, it starts from wanting to be able to have them speaking over a lot of music. Because it's another thing to try to, it's one thing to project in silence, and another thing to try to project over music. And we have a collaborator, Mark Bennett, who's a great composer, and Denis is mic'd in an Iliad. I don't know if you noticed that, but he's mic'd in an Iliad for the same reason, because it's part of the kind of world we're trying to create, that music is a big part of it. It's not sung, but it is spoken over music, and you really have to body mic to do that.
We also, you know, that space, we use an empty set, meaning there's nowhere to bounce sound. And if you're way upstage in an empty set, your voice just gets swallowed up. If you're down at the apron with a realistic set behind you with walls, you're great. But when you're trying to do something in an empty set like that, your voice just goes. I mean, I have a very good voice, and I work usually with no microphones on Broadway, but not every set is kind to you, depending on how it's built. Yeah.
Let's see. I think the gentleman with the beard back there was next, and then you.
What is it about the good book that you love?
Oh, it's you know, we worked on it for a long time. It's a beautiful play. Lisa and I did it in Chicago at Court Theater, and it was not a completely successful production. And then it kind of died, and then we got a grant from LA Theater Group. It was
From CTG.
CTG. It was a kind of a federal. Was it? It was government. I can't remember. Was it?
No, it was just a.
The NEA? Was it NEA?
No, it was just
them. Okay.
Yeah.
We got a lovely completion grant, and they breathed new life into it. And we went out there and we worked on it and invited a guy from Berkeley Rep to come and see it, Tony Tacconi, and he liked what he saw, and he took a leap with us and said, "I'll do it. I'll do your Bible play." And we went out to Berkeley Rep and we did it, and it was a beautiful production. Lisa directed it. Rachel was a set designer, and they nailed it. We whatever we hadn't figured out in Chicago, we figured out there.
We also rewrote it a lot.
We rewrote it a lot. We spent a lot of time rewriting. It's a beautiful play. It's beautiful. I love the characters. You know, I miss them. Sometimes I will remember a phrase and I kind of go, who said that? Oh yeah, or one of our characters said that. It's a beautiful play, and I love the way it ends. I love that ending so much. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to thank the two of you and my wife, Jennifer, for getting me 9 years ago an autographed copy of the script of an Iliad, which I then performed in Quincy University, and it remains one of the most treasured memories of my life. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. I love that.
There's a
orange book.
question back there. The person with his hand up.
Thank you.
That's wonderful.
Thank you. I was just wondering, what's the future of Song of Rome after Spoleto? And hi, Lisa.
Terry. Sorry, I was so busy.
That's okay. We'll talk.
Hear your question. Will you say your question again?
Yes. What do you have planned for the future of Song of Rome after the Spoleto Festival?
You know, Lisa and I are unhoused artists, which means that we're not affiliated with any particular theater. So we have a lot of people we would like to come and see it, and we would like to produce it for us. We're certainly shopping it around. We work with Octopus Theatricals, Mara, Isaac, and Tanisha Duggan. They're an amazing organization. They represent us in a way. So we would hope that they would help us find partners. We definitely have some vague commitments on doing it.
Well, including to you. Yes.
Where is he?
What's the proper title, Terry? It's Delaware.
My title?
Yes.
I'm the executive director of the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center, and we want to present Song of Rome probably in 25, 26.
Yes.
And we're very interested in doing Song of Rome and an Iliad together.
I think
That would be ideal.
We're
Yes.
very interested in that marriage.
I think we made this really fast because we were given this opportunity by Mina, Marcana, and Spoleto Festival to come back right away. And we had been working on it for a long time, but we had not gone through what we would call a traditional workshop process, which would be, many readings in front of a public with a question and answer period, so we would start to learn what is coming through, what is not coming through, what is working. It takes a real village to make a play or a musical. You have to keep trying it out. And because Mina gave us this opportunity, we worked really fast to get it ready and make something that we wanted to make something thrilling as best we could, put our ideas out there, and give Charleston and the audience at Spoleto something exciting to watch. We're learning a lot now, and so I think what would be ideal for us would be to go now to a longer, what we might call a traditional run at a theater, where we could rehearse and for 3 to 4 weeks, put it up in previews over a week, and then run it for 4 to 6 weeks. We need that longer process, because this is like a touring process, which usually is done when something is already cooked. When we brought in Iliad last year, we'd been performing an Iliad for 10 years. It was cooked. We knew what we were doing.
Yeah.
We came in, we teched it in 3 days, we put it up, and that's what it is. We know what it is. This, we are cooking.
Yeah.
And this was I feel really good about the first service of this recipe that we're trying out.
Nobody sent it back to the kitchen.
No, but I think after that, we would like to be able to start to tour it with an Iliad, so that another reason Denis isn't in Song of Rome is it's a lot of stress on his voice to do an Iliad. So when we always have to say to a presenting organization, we would love to come, but we can only do 2 shows in a row. Then we have to have a night off. Then we can do 2 more shows, and we can only do a total of 6, or whatever the exact writer is. Now, if we do it in concert with this, we could do more performances, and we are really excited by the way the 2 projects would speak to each other. We think we've buried some Easter eggs in Song of Rome
Yeah.
that are actually moments that one might recognize from an Iliad if you just saw it last night. You probably wouldn't recognize it if you saw it a year ago, but there are resonances between the two of them that I think are going to be really interesting. So we look forward to ultimately being able to do Iliad, Song of Rome as a touring idea, which is what we're hoping we will be ready to bring to Clarice Smith. We built it to tour. We built it here to tour. And so in a way, we kind of want to do back up a step, do a sit down, learn more about it, but we've constructed it to tour.
It's super easy. You just need 5,000 books.
Yeah, we don't have a set.
Super easy.
Except we have
your own moving band.
a construction. Yeah.
Just quick question, what are you doing next?
You know, I continue to write. I'm developing a TV series. I mean, I'm writing it myself and trying to pitch it, trying to find producers and people who will do it. That would be in Paris. It'd be French language. I would have to have other co-writers, but it'd be a French-based series. I'm going to do a movie this July, and I'm doing a new movie called The Postcard Killers. We did Postcard Killers already. It came out on Netflix. We're doing a sequel in August and September in Europe. I'll be shooting that. And then I think I'm going to try to do Here We Are Again, the Sondheim musical. I think we may be doing that in London.
Same cast?
I don't know.
I saw that on
don't
my
know.
birthday. It was my birthday present to myself. And it
Nice.
was great. I really
Nice.
enjoyed it.
Fun, a lot of fun.
I've got the high sign that it's time to say thank you very much and
Thank you.
to end this.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Martha.
It's fun. Fantastic.